Ceresa,
Yeah?
you have to be open and honest and brave. Tell the people what they need to hear.
Okay.
All right. When you close your eyes, you'll be Fun Cherry Girl.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Go.
Estrangement, by all accounts, is just a personal experience. It is, in essence, pain. Estrangement, then, is something I'm going to use to explore young people who crash out of their family unit to live independently. It's not too dissimilar to the common movie trope of pursuing art over science in a family, like, Dad, I am not inheriting your dentistry clinic, I choose musical theatre. But a bit more insidious. Charming as they may be, these movies never talk about the deconstruction of the parent-child relationship and the changing position of the young person in society. Let's travel a level up. Instead of honing focus on estrangement just yet, let's lift into thinking about existential loneliness. I think we can all relate to being lonely, romantically lonely, or maybe sitting in a room of people and thinking nobody gets you, maybe not having friends that you share much with. That loneliness is completely valid, and I do not mean to discredit you with this video. However, think about the notion of no one is coming. This essay operates on the assumption that these two are distinguished. We can feel lonely at school, but come home to a family. We can have a hard day at work, but sit at home and call our biological unit, and eventually maybe have a place to visit in the festive season. This encapsulates orphans, adopted children in the foster system, political differences, sexuality discrimination, irreconcilement. You know if you know. From the top, traveling a little bit further down, and we reach an existential loneliness. Isolation from peers for being neurodivergent or identity expressive. A divorce that cuts you off from your primary friendship circle. Community ejection that leaves you clawing at your phone wishing somebody would message. Sudden and unexpected loss. These situations are examples of an immediate transition between having a community and then it's gone. I'll talk more about community later, but estrangement is a lot more evil. Culturally, many believe that the family is a fundamental fixture of Western society, dependable, constant, and loving. What happens when it's not? So we've arrived from social loneliness to existential loneliness to becoming socially isolated, and thus we reach the loss of the family unit. Ugh! Dicey, spicy, hate it. But let's take things one at a time here. I've had 8 years to think about this, and let me tell you, I have some very strong adjectives. Lol. Let's lay down some terms. I mean family as in a group with blood or legal relation, and I mean estrangement as no communication with either living biological parent. Academics believe that the family is supposedly located in the private space of the home, differentiated from a house. I'm using a lot of air quotes here. You can't see my hands, and my stick figure canonically has no fingers. Whatever. The home is usually a symbolical concept of a place of belonging, and the house is a roof over your head. Estrangement, however loaded this term may be, is resultant in the loss of both family and home. Bordeaux argues that the condition of the family is the transmission of economic and cultural privileges, and that families are decisive in the role of social maintenance. But estranged family members no longer have this. Nowadays, my good friend and PhD candidate Waterman describes a move from using family as a descriptor of family ties to be more representative of emotional kinship, like in LGBT groups or friends as family. It doesn't really matter what the neo-family looks like because ultimately the relationship is none of anyone's business but your own. I cannot possibly describe the plurality of situations that people who experience estrangement and instability are in. I have always found it so interesting how workplaces brandish the word family, like a weapon. I think a lot of the time the idea of a family is embedded into normalcy. It's like an in-joke, and society is laughing at you for not getting it. If your manager tells you you have to work overtime at your bar job because that's what a family does, it might even be in the position of the young and vulnerable to believe them. Imagine you're off the family boat at 16 and you're surviving the hardest you can, and suddenly some guy twice your age tells you that family does extra hours for their workplace, and in your limited experience with your open wound, you don't immediately dismiss it. If you are that 16-year-old, I'm here to tell you that manager is not your new endpoint. Do your time and walk away. I think I'm comfortable to say that estrangement often happens in the stage of independent thought for young people. In the study of independence in UK higher education, the cutoff seems to be 25 or lower. It comes at a time of incubation, and in the information era, a lot of these kids are becoming exposed into the truth of their family. Sure, we can talk about narcissism and generational trauma, but in a world where young people regularly absorb a layman's psychoeducation and are exposed to the relationships of the world, I think the realization stage of a Stockholm Syndrome-esque "my parents are not good people" epiphany is drawn back earlier and earlier. Instead of shooting a glare at your radicalized tinfoil hat elders in your late 20s over Christmas dinner, now you are the young person equipped with the world knowledge that there are views outside from what you have been told. I think abuse hunts the ignorant and inexperienced, and if you are a child, more often than not, it is you. We as a society hate child abuse more than we do person-to-person abuse, or adult-to-adult abuse. Think about it, adults, in the position of parenthood, with a responsibility over you in a society and culture of family overall, drive the message in that blood is thicker than water, and you should stick it out no matter what. There is a pressure to commit to the family unit, and you are one of the weird ones if you leave. Even in this video, my focus is on young people affected by estrangement. You get the sense of where my priors lie by what topics I'm focusing on. You can make the argument that I invalidate the experience of adults who lose their birth children, but instinctually I am hesitant to this perspective. I am currently working towards an argument of power on the assumption that the power goes to the parents. Obviously, I maintain the bias as someone who has the lived experience of the child end of estrangement, but really, what I want to avoid doing is rationalizing the actions of my oppressor. For example, if I wear some shoes and now they have holes in them, I should probably get new shoes. It's hurtful and uncomfortable to get new shoes, but the arch support of my old shoe makes me feel really good. However, when I jump in a puddle, my entire foot gets soaked. The moment you begin to second-guess your intuition that you should maintain some distance, the entire operation falls apart. I think this applies both from adult down and child up. A toxic relationship that we perpetuate just because it's comfortable doesn't make it a good relationship to be in. A toxic relationship perpetuated by invisible fixtures of society and culture is even worse. I want to bring your attention to a recent article about a man on the autism spectrum being held in grossly negligent conditions in an attic by a mother and stepfather. This couple, being in their 40s, kept a 22-year-old they had responsibility over in their home for 7 months while he lived in his own feces at 39 kilograms. There are obviously many mechanics about why this happened, but I imagine a lot of the responses to this article are, how can a family let this happen? How could a mother do that? And I would put good money on that 22-year-old never seeing his parents again. This is an exertion of control over someone in a vulnerable position. This is an exertion of power that enables abuse. It strips you of your identity as an individual. You become a component in the wheel of pain, and there is something wrong with you if you wanted to stop turning. Because, baby, that's just the way it is. The parents know best, and you just got to deal. So, from the top, family independence is about transitioning between the state of having a parental presence and then not having a parental presence. In this interpersonal space, we find that a central theme to this issue is an imbalance of... Hold on to your seats. I'm going to use a metaphor. Here I go. In BDSM, one accepts that in the power exchange of person and partner, it is in a space of healthy boundaries, consent, and understanding. BDSM functions because of inherent trust between dominator and dominated, with a safe word being at the back of one's mind during play. However, in estrangement, a similar power dynamic exists. The dominator, the family, exerts power over the child, the dominated, but there is no consent. There is no safe word, and there is no cognitive backdoor. BDSM succeeds because there is a contractual understanding, even just verbally, of power in a healthy space, yet estrangement is the ugliest form of power transference. The young person is subjugated to power from the institution of the family, with no get-out-of-jail-free card at the back of the mind. After all, BDSM without consent is simply abuse. That is not to say that all Estrangement is about BDSM. However, young people in this dynamic are held in a suspension of power. In leaving the nest and burning the bridge between child and parents, the idea of I can tap out if I want to becomes removed. The roller coaster of emotion that surrounds being ejected into the world without a family unit was bearable until the realization that nobody is coming and the ride never stops. Where others say I can count on my mum to fix it, independent students no longer have that. In university environments, many rely on the bank of mum and dad to sustain them through their efforts, but independents are on the fence. The fear of failure pushes forwards, and institutions and gatekeepers push back, in the ultimate non-consensual power struggle. To put this more into the real world, the child oftentimes is at the whim of the parental unit or institution that they are in. I was watching a video recently about a girl called Patience who lived on Skid Row in Los Angeles, where her mother was battling addiction and she was homeless. The comments were about how much they felt for her, the psychological mechanisms that kept the girl sane, like her babyish behavior despite being 11 years old, and how she had the faith of the commenters to go above and beyond, because she was just so smart, to achieve everything she could ever want. One comment reads,
"This young child will make it in life. When she becomes of age and realizes what her mother is putting her through, she will venture out in the world on her own and make something of herself. I pray for this young soul."
The role of the mother has a clear protocol. Her body, her child, her rules. Mothers win custody battles. Mothers have a Mother's Day, and mothers are heroes. Mother knows best. Mumsnet.org.com.card.io is a celebration of maternity. Lily Allen loves mothers. In this guise, the mother, trying her best, takes Patience around Los Angeles with her, while an audience screams from the side, "Get her out of there! You are actively recording her realizing her trauma!" I think the saving grace of the video is what the channel has pinned.
I love how everyone in the comments has answers for everyone's problems and wants to help people across the country. Let me tell you folks, there's plenty of people in your own community who need the same help. There's just no one filming them. So please, if you want to help, start in your community.
Ultimately, I think this person is right. Patience is the child who was not to be viewed in a vacuum. There are thousands of children like Patience out there. There are thousands of children that are estranged out there too. They exist in your communities, they're in your universities, they're on your screen, they're going through school. Does society only care when there's a camera pointed at them? Does society only care when young people are stable and charismatic enough to be in front of a camera despite world-rendering trauma? I'm not sure. I'm beginning to think this is true. I was in a documentary myself for the BBC in 2019 at the holidays. I'm not sure I'll get into my hesitations about poverty exploitation or using my story as a means of inciting a response and engagement. But anyway, I implicitly asked that they came out of their cave to acknowledge my suffering and existence at the hands of their negligence. I think one of the boldest maneuvers of my life was to use an international story to challenge two people. The ultimate subtweet! The ultimate passive-aggressive jab! Take that! Let's get back on track. Essentially, this is me standing, and this is society. And society leg swoops me, and I go, oof. It's a metaphor. If you weren't following, you're following now. I think estrangement from an economic and social perspective is fascinating. You can step foot in a foster system, you can sign an affidavit relinquishing parental permission over you, you can block your biological parents on Facebook, maybe they're just flat out dead now, and immediately you plummet from whatever comfort you've retained straight down to the pits of society. You may not realize it immediately, but you lose all context, your safety net, your sense of home, the lot. I never thought I'd be homeless at 18. No one could have prepared me for it, but you never know how it feels until you're there. Until you're the one asking for money, for a place to stay, with your life on the line. The difference between losing everything to a natural disaster and losing everything to interpersonal fallout is that with a tornado, it's just a tornado, but with a family, it's so much more. I'm going to introduce another academic. Wait for it, here I go. Bentham introduces this idea of the panopticon as a way of observing prisoners in a jail with a single tower that observes all of its cells, like a donut, but the middle part is a dude. It's not necessarily that a guardsman can see you at all times, it's that he could see you at all times. In the information era and the time of being hyper online, I think there's a lot to be said about the estranged position and surveillance. If I have not had contact with my family for about 8 years now, I would say that for a good chunk of this, I felt like my every move was being accounted for. A large part of why I haven't given myself to the online space yet, despite numerous people telling me I'd make for a great entertainer, is because of the delicate balancing act of what I want my opponent to see. The BBC, for example, have an article titled "From Wedding Dresses to Camouflage Capes," which, in the context of the current Ukraine-Russia conflict, has some weird optics about it, describing seamstresses that have fled the war and are sending military garments as support. One, in the age of sensational news, we reveal the enemy tactics. But second, I just think this is so stupid. Camouflage! What camouflage? What does this do for anybody? It makes Ukraine's position weaker because now Russia knows what to look for. And the viewership, at most, is going to say, "Okay, cool, thanks, seamstresses." Even in presenting this video to you, the viewer, I am fully conscious of the inner politics of how I will be received, more so than the average streamer who has nothing to fear. From people I have not spoken to for 8 years, maybe they judge the cadence of my voice, the quality of the content I produce, my position in society. I don't know, and I don't think I'm going to find out. What I'm acknowledging then is the invisible power that hangs over my head of fear. So in the age of surveillance, where I fear that my misstep will have my ankle cut off by a bear trap, you know what I'm gonna damn do? I'm gonna upload this video. That's my answer to fear. Well, what do? So first, you start a lifelong project to start believing in people again. It is very easy with the information that you have, following a drastic life change, to cut off from the world. It is really understandable to perpetuate anger into future relationships that you foster, or even towards yourself, or legitimize toxicity with the suffering you've endured. This, I think, is the easy option. However, I think there is real gold and wisdom in not painting everyone with the same brush. There are good people that do bad things, and bad people that do good things. I can't force you to do this, but I will read you a message from Judith Herman's book, Trauma and Recovery, and I hope you find your own conclusions.
Traumatic events destroy the sustaining bonds between individual and community. Those who have survived learn that their sense of self, of worth, of humanity, depends upon feeling a connection to others. The solidarity of a group provides the strongest protection against terror and despair, and the strongest antidote to traumatic experience. Trauma isolates. The group recreates a sense of belonging. Trauma shames and stigmatizes. The group bears witness and affirms. Trauma degrades the victim. The group exalts them. Trauma dehumanizes the victim. The group restores their humanity.
Okay, let's continue this roadmap. Second, I want you to consider your bus factor, or rather key person insurance. You may be thinking, what is a bus factor? What is a key person insurance? Oh my god. So, in information security, you have a bunch of people in a team who have important skills and information that lets them do their job. You have some dudes who have like master admin privileges and then some dudes that don't. You can't give them all master admin privileges because if you give a nervous teenage nerd intern master admin privileges, they might brick the entire operation or click the wrong link in the wrong email and it's over. The bus factor is how many people need to be hit by a bus before everything goes wrong in the team. We aren't talking about information security in this video, we're talking about how to restore one's faith in humanity again after interpersonal loss. It is one thing to identify your bus factor, and another thing to take steps to make your number bigger. In loneliness, after a major life disaster, you start with absolute zero. You are given few tools to build your life. You are left with trauma and pain and confusion, and you maneuver to try and get the wheel of life turning again, for yourself. You find a partner, ideally, and you love them with all your heart. You commit your entire life to them because they make you feel like you have purpose and a sense of belonging. Finally, you are no longer disposable. Please observe this animation of me running over your significant other with a bus. Now what? Your bus factor was 1. If I were to illustrate this with a Venn diagram, you have one side, which is what you contribute to a relationship, the other side of what your partner contributes, and your space in the middle. If the majority of your life and belief in yourself occupies the space in the middle, and this person disappears, you are left with nothing. This isn't to say that you should clutch your cards close to your chest and not give too much to your partner, but it is to say that if you are a circle in your Venn diagram, then occupying your entire circle within your partners gives no space in your circle to share with other circles. There is so much to love and learn about and share yourself with in the world, and if you commit your whole to another person in an unhealthy and codependent way, and they get hit by a bus, you might not recover. Try and build a community that doesn't leave you on knife's edge. Build your base wide, and make sure your solution to your life trauma is sustainable and scalable. Lastly, you need to come to terms with your relationship to suffering. In Buddhism, suffering and death are treated as the only certainties to human life. Happiness may be fleeting and confusing, but suffering is definitely dependable, in all the worst ways. As I said earlier, it is very easy to justify your darkness with what has wronged you in the world. In this, you make a choice. Do you take the path of despair that has already been paved out for you, or do you push back against the darkness with your ambition to reclaim your life? Will you sink or swim? What can your suffering teach you about yourself and the world? What will you do with your suffering and pain? Where is your peace? BoJack Horseman, the show, discusses this. Turning trauma into art or meaning sounds appealing. It makes the pain worth enduring, maybe, because you get a result out of it. You're a piece of coal, pressed down for a millennia, and you hope to become a diamond. Honestly, let me tell you something. It is so important that you realize surviving the encounter is enough. I don't mean to be all wax philosophical about what you should do with your life. I think the video essayist space of YouTube is obsessed with being right. I mean, sure, there's a lot to gain from being correct. People have become more empowered with what to do with their lives. Maybe you have the panacea to poverty. Maybe you can load your cartridge with a magic bullet that ends despair with a take about bathrooms or politics or whatever. It doesn't matter. I think really what humans heal with is connection and understanding. I'm not sure I can give this to you if you are in a position where you need that. I'm the ethereal concept of a fun cherry girl you observe in your screen through your headphones or your speakers. If you want to help me, that's great. Thank you. If you want to help your community, that's great too. If you turn to yourself to ask, fun cherry girl in the depths of my despair and social isolation, what do I do? All I ask is that you pursue stability and choose kindness in the morning. I ask that you call someone you love maybe and tell them it's going to work out. In the face of vicarious trauma and war and illness and the excitement and agony of the news turnover, it's easy to forget that we are just people. From the show, I think there is a remarkable quote.
It takes a long time to realize how truly miserable you are, and even longer to see that it doesn't have to be that way. Only after you give up everything can you begin to find a way to be happy.
I think estrangement, as ruinous to my life as it has been, gave me the blessing of being the person I want to be brave. In this time of you watching this video, if it has you feeling a type of way, let's spend a second to grieve the loss of normalcy. Any longer and we risk overly ruminating, and soon the dark thoughts become overwhelming. Compassion fatigue is very real. There's a lot to be upset about, and you can't appeal to every human despair effort in the world. You can flick through the work of Amnesty International, volunteer at a soup kitchen, or look at the Soft White Underbelly YouTube channel where stories like Patience emerge. These people lose their support network and thrash about as they drown, with no one coming to help them. Climbing out of poverty is one of the hardest things to do in the world. There is just so much darkness. How are you meant to figure out what to care about? I mean, look, I saw this tweet today.
I'm a starving child, starving to death. And this is the very last thing I have ever read. Goodbye.
In an earlier video, I mentioned that grief and sadness is the tide, and you are standing on the beach. If you get knocked down, you'll drown. If you get up, you'll be hit by another tide, but you'll get to see the beautiful sunset. It's your choice. In my pain, I am faced with a quest. Do I sell my soul to the YouTube machine for profit? Am I being exploitative in this space? I'm not sure. Earlier, I cited a few academics about my idea of estrangement. I'll tell you what it really is. Estrangement is not having anyone from your biological family to visit your wedding, or conversely, to turn up to your funeral. Estrangement is hearing terrible medical news and sitting in your room and staring at the wall. Estrangement is wondering where you fit in society. Estrangement is being broke and having to turn to dark places to get funds. Estrangement is crying on the floor in the night wondering what's next. Estrangement is wondering if it is worth continuing a genetic legacy or just cutting generational trauma in the throat. Estrangement is having people blankly stare at you with no idea what to say. Estrangement is coming to terms with lovelessness and disposability. Estrangement hurts. In our lives, we construct stories, emotional stories. Everything in our life contains emotion. You have clicked on an estrangement video. You've built this parasocial relationship with me. You hear my voice and maybe you like it, and you believe in the things I say, as good as healing. You have no idea if I'm estranged or not. I could be telling you this script I have typed by the side of Mother Dearest on my chaise longue, being fed grapes in a comfortable nuclear family. You'll never know. You have constructed an emotional truth based on the information I have told you in this video that I am the girl I am telling you I am. There are thousands of young people who have lost their living families, and thus thousands of emotional truths that enter the institutions that make up our society as we ring the doorbell for housing agencies, education, and charities to take care of us and listen. Estranged young people lose the network that many believe is a fundamental node of our lives, and depend on the story they tell strangers to show compassion and help us. Now, I can summarize my life in a world record pace of 5 minutes. Purse-sized for any professional to digest. Spark-noted trauma, to be validated, to be pitied, to be given a platform. A YouTube essay to finally find my recognition. To many, what is heard in this video is sad, maybe unrelatable. It might even be pitiable. My life is not a story that immediately mirrors yours, and you don't have to understand where I come from. The truth, the nuance of estrangement, why a family falls apart, personal circumstances may be lost to the sands of time. Our lives and stories are not the same, but I'm telling you. Why? Does the truth matter? Does pain matter? Am I meant to let estrangement as an identity go? I haven't seen my parents in 8 years now, don't you know? You believe me, though, don't you? Don't you? Don't you?